I was packed for the beach when the HOA blocked my grandpa's truck at the gate, the flagpole clicking above the clubhouse like a metronome. They flashed a certified slip, said oversized overage, and later slipped a new bylaw onto the post office bulletin board. Neat handwriting, messy authority. Then came the turn my mom. The senator arranged a transfer ceremony right here by the flag with an order the clerk would read aloud. "Let me take you back." The security arm at the gate was down when we rolled up the yellow bar like a pencil across a ruled page. Grandpa eased the pickup to a stop with a soft sigh of brakes. It was the morning of our trip, cooler than July had any right to be on the Gulf, and the truck bed was already strapped with a blue cooler and 2 folding chairs. A white HOA truck idled sideways across the exit lane, lights blinking as if we were an ambulance to be diverted instead of a family headed to the beach. A young man in a polo stepped out holding a clipboard like a badge. "Morning," I said, reaching for the window switch. "Gate seems stuck." "It's not stuck," he replied. "It's closed to non-compliant vehicles." Grandpa's hand settled on the wheel. The veins stood out blue cords under parchment. He didn't say anything. The cicadas did the talking for him. Non-compliant how I kept my voice even. There were eyes on us porches nearby with railings just high enough to hide a face and a phone. The young man slid a paper into a plastic sleeve and held it where we could see. Certified tow slip. You're scheduled for removal if not remedied. Violation Community Aesthetics, Section 4.2. "It's a pickup," I said. "It's our pickup. Sir, I don't write the rules." "Then read them better," I said, but softer than it sounded in my head. Grandpa drew a breath that whistled a little as old reeds do. "Where you headed today, son?" he asked the young man. "Work," he said. So were we. The arm of the gate reflected a sliver of sky right across the hood, one clean line of light. I took the paper from the sleeve. The official seal in the corner was a raised circle that left a ghost imprint on my fingers. The words, "subject to tow," had been bolded. Underneath a blank for reason had been filled in with 2 different pens. "Who wrote this?" I asked. "Admin prepared it," the young man said. "I'm just serving notice." "Serving notice to my driveway." "Serving notice at the gate," he corrected. Grandpa's knuckles were white on the wheel. He stared straight ahead like a man timing a stoplight. I saw the list he'd taped to the dash, the one he'd made in block letters. Ice, bread. Sun grease, he always wrote. Grease, and the last line, see the water. "Is there an appeal?" I asked. "Board meets first Tuesday," he said. "You can send an email. Our trip's today." He waited perhaps for our apology to the rules. The bar did not lift. I glanced in the rear view. Mr. Nolan across the street was on his porch pretending to prune a ficus that had been plastic in the same pot since 19. 2 doors down, a curtain moved and stilled. The morning smelled like hose water and hot asphalt, even though the sun had barely warmed either. "Show me where it says a truck can't leave," I said. He tapped the paragraph with the back of his pen. Aesthetic impact on community value. Oversize, overage. The paper trembled in my hand, less anger than a thin current of embarrassment. "Overage," I said. "Are you carding engines now?" He shifted his stance. "Sir, if you move the vehicle, I'll have to call for tow, so if we don't move it, we can't leave, and if we do move it, you'll take it," I said, hearing how neatly the trap snapped. "That's tidy." "Compliance prevents confusion," he said, almost reciting. Grandpa finally looked over at me. His eyes were the milky blue of old bottles, steady as old rope. The keys on the ring, big brass ones he'd filed himself years ago to fit a stubborn ignition, rested in his palm. He didn't turn them. The truck's old clock ticked once as if to move time along. I felt my face heat not with fury, but with the kind of shame you get when a child tells you the truth in public. My mother would have cut through this with 3 lines and a phone call. She wasn't here, and it was my turn to be the voice that didn't shake. I leaned out. "Look, I said we're 2 streets down. We'll be back by supper. This is a family trip." "Sir," he said, and I knew the word after sir would be policy. From the porch across the way, Mrs. Nolan called, "Everything all right, Walter? not concerned enough to step down but curious enough to lean. "We're fine," I lied. The young man removed the slip from the sleeve and held it out for signature. The raised seal caught the light. There were 2 dates on it, one stamped, one handwritten. I could feel the tiny ridges of the embossing even without looking. The paper smelled faintly of toner and the citrus cleaner they used in the Clubhouse office. "What happens if I don't sign?" I asked. "It still applies," he said. "Signing just confirms receipt." A gull cut the air overhead and tossed its complaint toward the bay. The gate didn't care. The bar made its straight horizon across our morning. Grandpa cleared his throat. "We going or not?" he said, but he was asking me more than the road. I pictured the blue cooler in the back, the 2 chairs facing a strip of water we'd promised to sit beside, no schedule, just waves. The boy with the clipboard waited. The neighborhood did not blink. "They blocked a family trip at the gate," I said quietly to neither of them and both. The words sat there in the warm cab. I signed for receipt. The pen stalled at the first curve of the B in Briggs, as if the ink, too, would rather we were anywhere else. "Thank you," the young man said with the hard politeness of someone trained to be polite to anger. "Is there any way?" I began. He shook his head. "Sir, I don't make the rules. I know I said." It was the problem and the hurt all at once. Grandpa stayed still. The keys clicked once as the ring shifted in his hand. He didn't turn them. From behind us came a single beep from the reader post, the kind of small electronic sound that doesn't care about people. The bar remained down. I passed the slip back to him through the window. "We'll appeal," I said. "First Tuesday," he repeated. "And if they can't meet us before then," I asked. "Then you'll need to remain compliant," he said. The word remain did a small unkind thing to the inside of my mouth. The young man returned to the HOA truck. He spoke into a radio and nodded to a voice none of us could hear, then put the clipboard away like a job well finished. Our lane stayed blocked. I looked at Grandpa. "I'll walk to the office," I said. "See if they'll talk now." He didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the bar as if patience could lift it. The skin at his temples fluttered where the pulse shows up in old men and new birds. For a heartbeat, I thought of turning the wheel, taking out a sprinkler head and the corner of the grass, and betting the HOA wouldn't tow a moving target. The thought passed like a dare and left a sting. The neighborhood watched. The morning stretched like taffy. The cooler sweated. Walter, Mrs. Nolan, called again. "You need anything, no ma'am?" I said, and hated that it sounded like surrender. The cicadas ratcheted higher until it felt like standing in an engine compartment. I opened my door and stood on the driveway pavers. They were warm already. I smoothed the slip against my thigh, the seal a pale circle under the sunlight, now the words cooling into their own authority. I looked at the gate at the truck at my grandfather's hands. "If they can stop us here, what else can they take?" Grandpa didn't look at me when he spoke. "We'll do it right," he said. "No need to make a fool of ourselves?" I know I said. The bar didn't move. The neighborhood didn't breathe. The day we'd planned had been trimmed to fit inside their sentence. I shut the door softly so as not to shake the list on the dash. "I'll go to the office," I said. "Back in 10. "Don't take long," Grandpa said, finally turning the keys just enough to make the battery light glow. "We've got water to see." The light went out when he let the keys slide back. The arm of the gate held steady, thin, bright, implacable. And the porches kept watching as I started toward the clubhouse, slip in hand, cheeks, hot, voice, steady because it had to be. The email arrived before dawn like a mosquito that knew where the skin was thinnest. Subject line: Notice of Non-Compliance Community. Value Impact. I opened it at the kitchen table. The blinds made narrow ladders of gray across the formica. My coffee steamed in the chipped blue mug and went on steaming untouched. Bad Grandpa asked from the hallway, his voice gravel with sleep. "Official," I said. "Worse than bad." I read aloud because it steadied me. "Your vehicle and related storage implement an adverse aesthetic lowering neighborhood comparables and increasing insurer risk exposure." Grandpa blinked. "In English, they think your truck makes the block look poor," I said. He gave a soft harumph. "It makes it look like somebody here knows how to move a sofa." There was more. Pursuant to Section 4.2 and 4.2b, I stopped. 4.2b. Have you ever seen a bee? Only the kind that stings, he said. My cursor hovered over the attachment Revised Bylaws Community Aesthetic Addendum. I clicked. The PDF wheezed open like an old door. Down at the bottom of the first page, a seal sat embossed into scan gray a circle with a live oak and the words Heritage Pointe HOA. The deeds and seals in this town liked their trees. A new paragraph glowed faintly as if the ink hadn't finished drying. Vehicles older than 15 years require concealment or approval. Oversized vehicles must be garaged or removed at HOA discretion. Concealment, I said. Are we supposed to dress it in a trench coat? Grandpa shuffled in and set his palm against the coffee mug like it was a small heater. He didn't lift it. Steam curled up made a thin ghost in the morning light. We both watched it for a breath-long beat. Reply to them, he said finally. I will, I said, and I need to see the notice on the bulletin board. Whoever pushes an email will tack a paper too. He nodded toward the door. Take a picture for your mother. I knew he meant for yourself, but he liked to loan Courage other names. At the post office, the morning crowd performed the usual ballet flip-flops, squeaking doors, sighing the clerk in a saint's cap sorting parcels like he was playing an old piano. The bulletin board under plexiglass showed piano lessons Lost Cat Church Supper, and in the top left corner, a crisp white rectangle, Community Reminder Vehicle, Aesthetic Policy. I stood close enough to fog the plexi. The policy listed 4.2 and 4.2b, just like the email. At the bottom, someone had stamped the live oak seal, but the pressure looked uneven, a little flattened as if the stamp hadn't wanted to land. Morning, Walter the clerk said without looking up, You folks headed to the beach already. Not with the gate down, I said. You seen this posted before? Not that exact one, he said, flipping a padded envelope end over end. They swapped the top left corner like church flowers. You remember when they swapped it? He squinted, thinking. Yesterday afternoon, the lady with the binder and the pen that clicks. Marjorie, I said. Sounds right. A woman in a visor read her mail at the counter. She glanced over. Is this about the old picker truck? She asked, making a noise with the word old that tried to sound friendly and didn't. It's about rules, I said. Rules keep property values up, she said, and dropped a sales circular into the bin. Bylaws don't change overnight unless someone needs them to, I said. The phrase surprised me by how true it felt leaving my mouth. The clerk scratched his jaw. You want me to make a copy for you? Picture's fine, I said, and took one, but my thumb caught a glare on the plexi. I took another, then a third from the side, the way you do when you've learned that documentation is a long road of short steps. Back home, the blinds sliced the kitchen into neat little lanes of light again. Grandpa was back in his chair. The list on the dash had not moved, and neither had he. It's posted, I said. He nodded. Read me what it says. I read the paragraph. He listened with the attention he used to give carburetors. And the dates he asked. I zoomed in on the footer. In the PDF version, revised June 1st. In the posted version, the same line had been covered with a small white label. Revised April 1st. April Fools, Grandpa said without smiling. Could be different versions, I said, though the words sounded like they'd been told to put on their coats and keep moving. I replied to the email with an attachment photo of the board notice photo of the gate slip and a request for the original adoption record of Section 4.2b. I CC'd the generic board address and the management company I'd only ever seen once at a holiday party when they dropped off cookies like apologies in cellophane. A reply came quick. Thank you for your message. Your concern will be reviewed at our next scheduled meeting. Please refrain from moving the vehicle to avoid tow. I typed, deleted, typed again. Who added 4.2b? I wrote, When was it voted? Please share minutes. Another auto. We appreciate engaged residents. Minutes are posted after approval. Engaged, I said to the kitchen. We're married to your policy now. Grandpa lifted the mug an inch and set it back down. The steam curled again, faithful to its one job. We'll go by the office, he said. Folks talk different when you stand there. Let me try one more thing first, I said, and pulled the PDF back up. The bottom of the page included a document path, one of those little details that slip through when someone exports too fast. Admin, Rules, 2024, Addendum 4, 2B, Final 2.pdf. Final 2, I said, meaning there's a final one. The cursor felt heavy as a crowbar. I opened the file properties. Created date, June 1st. Modified, June 28th. The posted notice said April 1st. The toe slip from yesterday. The meeting date next Tuesday. The puzzle arranged itself with all the warmth of a spreadsheet. I'm going to walk back to the post office, I said. Grandpa frowned. Again, I want the notice under glass in my phone before somebody thinks to proof it, I said. And I want a shot from the corner where the stamp looks wrong. At the bulletin board, I crouched and angled the lens so the seal's impression threw a shadow. The ring of the oak looked tired, more press than emboss. A woman in a church t-shirt paused. You like to read the rules, she said. I like to see them, I said. Same difference, she said, but her voice softened. My brother's in insurance. He says the word discretion is where bills get paid. Back in the kitchen, I set the phone down like it might rattle. Their PDF says June, I told Grandpa. The bulletin says April. The file's name says Final 2. He nodded once. So I said, feeling the line appear in my head before I heard myself say it. The fine print was altered last month. He didn't ask how I knew. He just looked at the blinds at the narrow stairs the light was making on our wall and let out a breath like a small laugh. Then that's where we climb, he said. I sent one more email to the board. Please confirm the vote date for 4.2b and share the red line. Our family is being blocked at the gate based on a clause that doesn't appear in prior records. I copied myself because paper trails have a way of vanishing when no one else is looking. A minute later, a different address pinged Administrator. We appreciate your diligence. We will address this at the next meeting. I stared at the line until the steam above my coffee thinned and lost its shape. The blinds lifted a breeze slice onto the table. Somewhere down the street, the HOA truck beeped in reverse, a sound like a patient being wheeled away. Walter Grandpa said gentle as before. Yeah. Are we still going to see the water? I folded the printed email and the photo into a manila envelope. We will, I said. But first, we're going to see the records. The morning felt a degree brighter, not because the rules had changed, but because we'd found the seam where they'd been stitched. And a seam is a kind of promise. Pull the right thread and even a neat garment remembers it was once pieces. The Beach Boulevard Diner had been there since the 60s, its neon shrimp blinking tiredly even in daylight. The windows smelled faintly of fried batter and salt. Inside the vinyl booths held a mix of churchgoers and shift workers, and every table wobbled just enough to remind you it had a history. Mom was already in a corner booth, a briefcase on the seat beside her. She wasn't smiling. She tapped the manila folder like it was a metronome. When she looked up and saw me and Grandpa, she slid the folder forward and said, "They gave you a slip at the gate. Show me." I passed it across. The embossed oak seal looked smaller here under fluorescent light than it had under the sun. Mom smoothed the page with one palm, then reached into her case. From an inside pocket, she produced a round metal seal, official and weighty. She set it beside the diner's salt shaker. "That's mine," she said. "Senate office, authorized for constituent matters." The waitress appeared with 3 tall glasses of sweet tea. Ice clinked like small bells. For a beat, we all just listened. Mom. "I said we didn't come to drag politics into this. It isn't politics," she said. "It's law. Different tool, same wood shop." Grandpa slid the slip back toward me. "We need a saw, not a sermon." Mom opened the folder. Inside lay a plat map of the subdivision taped across the folds. Colored pencil marks highlighted easements, drainage paths, and the gate easement line. "They can't block access across a recorded easement," she said. "That's County 101. I pulled the original plat from the courthouse yesterday." I leaned closer. The map smelled of dust and old ink. In the margins, the clerk's handwriting still visible, filed 1998. Section 4.2b, I said. "They added it last month." She nodded. "And they didn't file an amendment with the county. That means it's just paper, not law." The waitress set down a plate of shrimp baskets, grease paper, sighing. Mom barely glanced. She slid another document out of transcript excerpt lines, indented, time-stamped. Meeting transcript HOA board work session, June 28. Chair, will insert the language as discussed. Adjust comparables. Treasurer, no need for a vote if it's a correction. I blinked. No vote. She shook her head. No record of adoption. Which means... She paused long enough for the ice in her tea to shift again. They broke their own bylaws, I said, finishing for her. That's our opening. Grandpa gave a soft grunt that might have been agreement. So, what do? File a letter. We prepare quietly, Mom said. When they expect silence, we build a record. Then we show up where they can't ignore us. Like court, I asked. Or an open house, she said. Either way, they'll learn documents are louder than gate arms. I traced the plat with my finger. The easement line ran like a lifeline right through the shaded box marked gate. My breath slowed. The morning's humiliation still burned, but here it had a counterweight paper older than the board's memory drawn in steady lines. Quiet preparation is louder than any gavel Mom said almost to herself. She closed the folder with a soft thump. The diner noise went on Fryer's orders, called forks tapping, but our booth had its own air tight with ink and possibility. Grandpa picked up a shrimp, bit it in half. So, when he asked, "When you're ready," Mom said, "I'll back you, but this has to be your fight, not mine." Her eyes landed on me. She wasn't challenging, she was offering a hand across a rope bridge. I looked at the toe slip, the plat, the transcript fragment. The three papers together weighed more than the humiliation at the gate. For the first time since the bar had come down, I felt the stir of choice rather than sentence. "All right," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. "We'll fight back." The lien notice was the color of bad mustard and twice as sour. Subject encumbrance vehicle title, pending compliance. Time, 03:15 a.m. 3:15, I read standing at the counter in the county office. "Grandpa, you asleep at 3:15. "At my age," he said, "I'm asleep at 3:15 and 3:16. The clerk slid the paper closer with one finger. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead in a tired rhythm like they'd been asked to stay late too many years in a row. The room smelled of paper dust and lemon cleaner. Behind us, the courthouse hall coughed people past sandals, slow talk a stroller squeaking. Mom stood beside me, arms folded, watching like a carpenter checking a level. "Who filed this?" she asked the clerk. "HOA management," he said. "Electronic upload." We stamped it when the system pinged the queue. At 3:15 in the morning, she asked. He shrugged. "Q doesn't sleep." I turned the paper. Someone had embossed the Heritage Point seal in the lower corner. Under the weak courthouse light, the circle wasn't crisp. The oak branches blurred, and the outer ring looked shallow on one edge, deep on the other. The page itself had a faint diagonal sheen, a tell that it had been scanned and printed again. "Do you have the camera log that goes with this?" I asked. "Public portion," he said, pulling a thin folder from the tray. He slid me a photocopy grainy grayscale, a gate captured by a lens that had given up on being interested. 03:15:02. Unauthorized vehicle movement license masked. 03:15:05. Gate arm triggered manual override. "Masked," I said. "Convenient." Mom leaned in. "Can we see the original file? FOIA, he said. Or a friendly call from counsel." Mom smiled without showing teeth. "Let's do friendly." She took out her phone, tapped, and set it down face up. We waited while the lights considered another blink. Grandpa sat in the plastic chair by the wall, the kind that built up a little static against wool pants. He held the manila envelope with the toe slip like it was a fragile photograph. If I had gone anywhere at 3:15, he said it would have been to the bathroom, and you don't need a gate key for that. From the hallway, a bailiff pushed a cart stacked with file boxes labeled in Sharpie. The wheels made a tired sound over the marble lip. Mom's phone buzzed. She put it on speaker. Counsel, a voice said, "Explain my morning." "Your client's camera log shows movement at 3:15, Mom said. "County has a lien notice with that timestamp. We're questioning both." A pause. Our logs are accurate. We'll need the original export, not a printout, Mom said. Metadata. And the gate manual override record. Another pause longer. We'll check, the voice said. Send a written request. I just did. Mom said, and ended the call. I traced the hairline of the embossed seal with my eyes. On the lower right quadrant, the circle dipped shallow, then bit too deep, as if the stamp had slipped and been corrected, the paper accepting both truths. I lifted the corner and let the light rake across. In the shadowed relief, the flaw looked like a crack. May I asked the clerk, and he nodded. I took a photo, angled just so. The seal's wobble looked worse through the lens. I sent it to myself, then to Mom. If the seal was cracked, I said, the words arriving more certain than I felt, so was their case. Mom tilted her head. Slow down, she said, but her eyes warmed. The clerk tapped the camera log with his pen. Motion detection at 3:15 might be wind. The system flags anything. Manual override means somebody used the maintenance key to test the arm. Maintenance, I asked. We reset them sometimes when they stick, he said. Or when the reader's fussy. My mouth went dry. Who has that keyboard? He said. Security? Management. And at 3:15 Mom asked. Could be scheduled, he said. Could be a test after lightning. Last night was clear, I said. I heard the edge in my voice and smoothed it. Can we check the weather log? The clerk grinned, impressed or amused. You boys do your homework. Mom's phone buzzed again, an email this time. She skimmed it, then showed me the screen. From HOA admin. Subject, camera, export, request, body. Attached, please find still frames. Original file not available due to retention policy. Already, I said. That was fast. Too fast, Mom said. She opened the attachment. The still frames were worse copies of the copy we'd just seen, all washed grays and generous assumptions. In one frame, the gate arm looked down as expected. In another, the timestamp sat on a white rectangle like it had been laid over the image rather than baked into it. Layered, I said. Possibly, Mom said. Or a lazy export. Grandpa cleared his throat. Lazy exports don't wake up at 3:15, he said. The clerk stood and walked to a back cabinet. He returned with a narrow binder. Manual override logs, he said. Paper ones. Some folks still like pens. He flipped to last night. 0310, 0320. A shaky initial looks like PD. Note, tested arm. Cleared. PD, I said. Paul Danner. Treasurer. Mom took a picture of the line. The fluorescent bulb above us hummed hard for a second, then settled back into its high-pitched compromise with time. Can I get a certified copy of this lien? I asked. The clerk nodded and walked to the stamping station. He lifted a heavy seal press and brought it down on a fresh page with the authority of a small thunderclap. The impression came out perfect, clean edges, oak branches, sharp enough to scratch your fingertip. I set the county seal next to the HOA one. Side by side, one was a tree, the other a suggestion of leaves. Even a forged seal leaves a crack. I said not loud, but clean enough to hear myself believe it. Mom leaned close. We won't call it that yet, she said. We'll say irregularity. Judges like modesty. Grandpa looked up at the ceiling. I like coffee, he said. Modesty can come with pie. I smiled, despite the heat in my chest. One more thing, I said to the clerk. Can we see the file path on the county system for the lien upload? He turned the monitor slightly enough for me to see the screen without touching it. Incoming, third party, HPHOA, lien vehicle 0702.pdf, created 0704 AM, stamped 0912 AM. The system, time, and stamp time don't have to match, he said. Q, batch, coffee breaks. But the notice says 3:15, I said. That's their timestamp, he said. Yours is the county's. The hallway noise thinned. A woman laughed. A door somewhere shut with institutional finality. Mom gathered the papers into a neat stack. We have enough, she said. Enough for what I asked. To force discovery, she said. To make them bring the original files. To make them explain why a maintenance key turned at 3:15 and why a lien carries a wobbly seal. Grandpa stood. The plastic chair sighed in relief. And to get my truck to the water, Mom met his eyes. Soon, she said. But first we take this to a room where facts have to stand up. We stepped back into the hallway. Sunlight came through the high windows like thin gold ladders. The courthouse smelled faintly of brass and old paper. I tucked the certified copy into our envelope, the crisp seal cool under my thumb. Behind us in the county office, the fluorescent light blinked once more as if it were willing to testify. Proof wasn't a shout. It was a stack, weighty, quiet, and hard to argue with. And for the first time since the gate arm dropped, it was on our side. The courthouse clerk carried the folder as if it were heavier than paper ought to be. He laid it on the counter, opened it to the last page, and turned it so the signature faced us. Then he pressed a blocky stamp into the margin ink, bled into oak pulp with a sound like a cough. "There it is," he said. "Temporary injunction, effective immediately." The red seal gleamed wet. For a moment the room went still except for the slow tumble of dust motes in a shaft of light. Even the clerk's pen hovered before it clicked back into place. I exhaled. Grandpa leaned forward, squinting like the words were a road sign a mile off. "What's it say?" he asked. "It suspends the HOA's enforcement power," Mom said, scanning fast. "Gate liens fines all frozen until review." The clerk added, "Locks can be changed by neutral custodian." That's us. Grandpa straightened, a thin smile flickering. "So they can't bar us from going to see the water." "Not today," Mom said. The clerk slid over a yellow carbon copy. "Post this on their bulletin board within 24 hours. We'll pin ours here in the courthouse." I touched the ink. It was still tacky. The sensation was a relief and a weight all at once, like holding back a door in a windstorm. From the hallway came the sound of sandals and the squeak of stroller wheels. A woman pinned a flyer to the courthouse bulletin board, church rummage Saturday 10/2. Our injunction would hang beside casserole fundraisers and missing dog notices, the law, living shoulder to shoulder with community errands. Mom folded the paper neatly and handed it back for sealing. "We'll need 2 certified copies." The clerk obliged. The press clamped down with a thud that reminded me of fence posts hammered into clay. "There," he said. "It's secure now." The words landed like a promise. Chateau. Back in the neighborhood, the air felt changed, though the sun was the same. At the clubhouse bulletin board, the formal notice already fluttered behind glass. A bold heading. Court order, temporary injunction. Beneath it, dates and docket numbers, the font plain as a road atlas. Neighbors stopped to read. Some frowned. Others nodded with a kind of careful relief. I saw Paul Danner from the board linger at the edge, arms crossed, jaw tight. Grandpa muttered, "Bet he won't like reading in public." "He doesn't have to like it," Mom said. "He has to live with it." A boy on a bicycle coasted past a rubber squealing, then leaned down to peer at the paper. "Does this mean no more fines?" he asked. "Means no new ones until a judge decides," Mom said. He grinned and pedaled off. Inside the clubhouse foyer, a folding table had been set with a neighborhood sign-up sheet. Someone had written at the top, "Keyholder rotation pending custodian order." A jar of pens rattled as neighbors scribbled names. Each name felt like a small flag staked back into common ground. Grandpa looked at the line forming. "All those years they kept the keys behind one desk," he said. "Now the desk is ours." I picked up a pen, hesitated, then wrote our family name. The ink skipped halfway through and I pressed harder. The paper accepted the mark in 2 tones as if to remind me nothing arrives perfectly at once. From the doorway, Mom spoke low enough for only us to hear. "This is step 1. Locks and paper, but we still have to cure the money." Her tone didn't undercut the relief it framed it. The injunction was a wall, but beyond it was still the field to cross refunds, audits, repair of trust. Grandpa leaned on the pen jar, smiling, crooked. "Justice sounds like a key turning," he said. I held the injunction copy flat in my hand. The embossed seal caught light through the foyer glass, a circle firm where the HOAs had wobbled. For once, proof favored us. The church hall smelled of sheet cake and floor polish, that particular mix of sugar and wax that meant the room had been borrowed for something serious. Folding chairs squeaked against tile as neighbors filled every row. No banner hung, no balloons. Only a long table at the front with a single object resting in the middle, an audit ledger thick as a family Bible. The choir was rehearsing 2 rooms over. Their voices rose faintly through the cinder-block walls, not a hymn yet, just vowels and scales. It gave the hall a tremor, like the building itself was clearing its throat. Mom stood at the front, hands clasped on the ledger. "We asked for records," she said. "Today, we share them." I sat in the second row beside Grandpa, who held a styrofoam cup in both hands. The thin walls of the cup dented under his grip the little squeak of foam against palm cutting through the murmur. At the side wall, the meal train corkboard displayed its usual calendar names written in marker for who would bring lasagna or chicken casserole to which house. Community looked ordinary there. Tonight, it leaned forward in chairs waiting for numbers. The auditor, a woman from the county with square glasses, flipped open the ledger. Total collected in assessments, she read $432,000. The room shifted, people whispering. She turned a page. Disbursed maintenance insurance landscaping, 42%. Remaining funds, unallocated bonus line items. She paused, squinting. Listed as administrative incentive. Paid to Treasurer Paul Danner. Heads swiveled toward Paul sitting stiff near the aisle. His jaw worked, but no sound came. Mom's voice was calm. "Mr. Danner." He stood awkwardly. It was approved. By vote, she asked. He looked down. By precedent. Which precedent silence stretched. A chair squeaked. The choir in the other room held a note so long it sounded like a wire pulled tight. Paul's shoulders lowered. "I took bonuses," he said, words falling like chalk on tile. "More than I should have. I'll repay." A murmur swept the hall. Some folded arms, some nods. One man clapped once, stopped, then everyone fell quiet again. Grandpa sipped from the dented cup. "About time," he muttered. Mom tapped the ledger gently. "The schedule for refunds will be posted. Every household will see a portion returned. This isn't charity, it's restoration." The auditor nodded. "Checks prepared within 60 days. Oversight by county." Someone in the back whispered, "So we can breathe again." I felt my own chest expand, air filling places tight for months. Mom lifted her eyes across the hall. "A community's voice is louder than any gavel," she said. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The choir's next chord seemed to echo her words through the cinder block. Neighbors clapped, not polite but insistent, a rolling sound that carried weight. For 3 seconds, everyone stood still in applause, then sat again as if they'd remembered how to breathe. Paul sank into his chair, head bowed. The styrofoam cup in Grandpa's hands gave one more faint squeak. Mom closed the ledger. "This book comes with us. Tomorrow at noon on the clubhouse lawn, we'll hold a transfer ceremony. The order is ready. The locks will change." The room erupted, not wild, but certain the way a choir resolves a hymn into its last clear chord. And in that moment I knew tomorrow wouldn't just be paperwork, it would be proof in sunlight. Grandpa let the pickup idle at the curb, the engine's steady thrum, older than most of the houses around us. He sat behind the wheel hat, tilted back, watching as the crowd gathered on the clubhouse lawn. The air smelled of cut grass and salt off the bay. Mom stood near the flagpole, transfer order in hand, her Senate seal affixed like a promise. Folding lawn chairs fanned out in uneven rows. Neighbors in sun hats shaded their eyes, passing printed programs that flapped in the coastal wind. On the back page, Transfer Ceremony, October 12th. The flag rope clinked softly against metal, the sound precise as a clock marking this hour from all the others. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence held respectful and fragile. Then the color guard stepped forward. Volunteers from the high school ROTC, not soldiers, but kids in pressed shirts who carried themselves taller today. They raised the flag slow, the rope creaking until the cloth unfurled in the breeze. Applause rose, not wild but unified. Mom cleared her throat. This order, she said, lifting the paper transfers authority from the board to the community. Locks will change today. Records belong to all of us. The clerk from the courthouse stood at her side, a brass key in his hand. He placed it into the new lockbox mounted at the clubhouse door. The click carried across the lawn. Grandpa eased himself out of the truck, leaning on the door. The son hid his glasses, caught his smile. He walked forward and tapped his own ring of battered truck keys against the lockbox, metal against metal, past against present. The sound was small, but it pulled a cheer from the crowd. I felt the sting of tears before I realized they'd come. A neighbor unfolded the sheet cake on the refreshment table. Children darted between chairs, program handouts turning into makeshift kites. Someone began a hymn, soft, and others joined until the hall of voices grew wider than the lawn itself. At the flagpole, Mom read the final paragraph aloud. Effective immediately. Custodianship vested in community trustees. Order signed, sealed, and entered. The plaque waited beneath a cloth. Together, two neighbors pulled it free. Bronze letters caught the light. Heritage Point Clubhouse, restored to community 2024. In honor of residents who stood together, hands rose in applause. Others simply pressed palms over hearts. The rope clinked again as the wind shifted steady as an amen. I stepped closer and traced the plaque with my fingertips. The metal was warm from the sun, firm under my hand. Legacy is preparation that outlives injustice, Mom said beside me, her voice steady. I nodded, touching the final line, feeling the groove of each letter. Some trips end in community, I whispered. The applause swelled once more, carrying us all past the gate, past the months of notices and humiliations, into something that felt like restoration. The flag still snapped in the coastal wind as sunlight shimmered across the clubhouse lawn. The new lockbox key felt solid in my hand, heavier than its size as the transfer order hung framed inside the hall. We didn't just replace locks. We reclaimed, trust one page of bylaws corrected in daylight. One neighbor's voice restored in the circle. Years of tension settled into something quieter, steadier. Justice isn't loud. It's steady. And as I touched the bronze plaque, I realized the old trip that never began had carried us here instead to a place of shared ownership. Share your HOA story below your map might help someone redraw theirs.